Hey there, welcome, welcome. I'm Marina Orms, the founder of Astrology Heals at astrologyheals.com. And today I'm so excited because this is the third video in our countdown to 2022 series. I've already released 2 videos on some awesome topics, so be sure and check those out. Today, we're going to be talking about the Saturn Uranus Square. And the theme is shaping the future through authentic action. So in this series, we are addressing the situation and the challenges that we are experiencing in the world. Of course, the pressures that are there in the collective are also affecting all of us individually and in our own lives, and the ways that we take care of ourselves and respond to these challenges are going to be so important as we go forward. And so understanding this bigger picture of the astrological energies, why things are happening the way they are, and what we can expect as we head into 2022, what that will look like, and what we can do to stay safe and sane and continuing to move forward. So our theme today is shaping the future through authentic action. And Saturn, the planet of responsibility and discipline and effort and hard work and limitation, also mortality, it has gone into the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is more about freedom, rebellion, seeking our own path, marching to our own drummer. Aquarius is also about change. It's about the future. It's about the ways that we want to shape and see change in the world around us and in our lives. And so Saturn is forming a square to the planet Uranus. And squares in astrology, squares are evolutionary pressure. So in astrology, we have these cycles that happen, and I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Cycles of Healing. Here it is if you want to see it. You could check it out. It's available at astrologyheals.com and on Amazon. So in this book, I talk about how the cycles of astrology support us in our own healing and growth and evolutionary process. And when we can understand the energies and these cycles and what is happening in the cycles at different times, it helps us to work with that energy consciously. So when we know, for example, that there's a new moon, we can set our intentions because it's the beginning of the cycle. It's the time to plant the seed for what we want to see unfold as the cycle progresses. When we get to the square, which is the first time the 2 planets are 90 degrees apart, which just means, all 90 degrees means is that when one planet is setting, the other planet is directly over your head. So think about a circle going around the sky. You see half of it above the horizon, and half of that circle would be below the horizon. And the path of that circle is where you see the sun set and rise and set. Same with the moon. The moon rises and sets along the same path. That is what we see. And the rising between the time that it rises and sets is half of the circle. So when you take that circle and you have one planet in a position where it's setting at the same time as another planet is directly above, same thing if a planet is rising and another planet is directly above, that's 90 degrees of separation within a 360 degree circle. So 90 degrees of separation means a square. And a square in the cycle of the planets, because they go from together to 90 degrees apart to opposite to 90 degrees apart again to coming together again, just the same way that the hands on a clock go from, you have the hour hand is at the 12 and the minute hand is going around while the hour hand is slowly making its way to the 1. And that's very similar to the way that the planets move around this circle. So when they reach that point where they're 90 degrees apart, they are creating a pressure on us to change, to evolve, to steer the ship, to shift our consciousness, to elevate how we are approaching a problem. So when you think about that, quote that's been attributed to Einstein, I don't know if he said it or somebody else did, but that you cannot solve the problem from the consciousness within which it was created. You need a higher consciousness to be able to see the solution to a problem that's stuck. And so we get these squares in the movement of the planets, with the inner planets and the moon. They happen all the time. With the outer planets, when they form squares with each other, they tend to be a long time in between aspects. And then when we have an aspect, it tends to last a long time. So what's happened since the beginning of 2021 is that we've had this square beginning to form between Saturn and Uranus, both outer planets. The square stayed in place more or less. I mean, it was exact 3 times throughout the year. It's actually not had its third exact square yet, which is that square will happen on December 23rd, 24th, depending on your time zone. It'll be December 23rd in the Pacific time. But so that will be the third time that square, or that 90-degree separation between those two planets, is exact. And that square, even though it's not going to be exact in 2022, it moves apart, and then the planets go retrograde. So it comes back very, very close to an exact square. It comes back within a degree of being exact again in 2022. So what does this mean for us? First of all, following the triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn during 2020, which I talked about some in my first 2 videos, that Capricorn energy has brought us the beginning of a cycle that is about creating structures and foundations. And with Pluto moving through Capricorn, as I mentioned in depth in our last video, Pluto is coming through energetically, and our systems, structures, institutions, governments, wherever we see authority, those things are really up for us to look at and say, is this the way you want to keep doing this? Do you want to do it differently? This is your chance to lay a new foundation. And what happens is that we have this, so we had the planet Saturn, which rules Capricorn. The planet Saturn went into Aquarius on the winter solstice at the end of 2020, when it formed its conjunction with Jupiter in very, very early Aquarius. So with Saturn moving into Aquarius, we had this shift into a theme that has to do with freedom, with rebellion, with authenticity, and how we do things in a way that brings greater equality, greater things like social justice. And you can see that in in society, we've been really, with this shift of Saturn into Aquarius, we've really begun to take more seriously and our patterns of racism, the history that our country is founded on, and institutions of racism, and how that shapes who we are. Social justice in so many different ways, the way that women have been treated, and the Me Too movement, and women's rights, Indigenous rights, all kinds of ways that we can look at equality, which is what the theme of Aquarius brings. It really asks us to look at equalizing everyone in, and asking us to say, hey, you're not looking anymore to an authority figure to solve your problems. You need to be looking within. You need to be asking yourself, how are you responding to the situation? What would you do? How do you want to address the need for change and stand up in terms of your own rebellion, and being authentic in your ways of challenging authority? So we have that energy of Saturn going into Aquarius. Now, when it forms this square with Uranus, again, a square is a pressure. It's a pressure to shift to a higher consciousness. It's a pressure to evolve. And when we say pressure astrologically, how that shows up in the world is things get really uncomfortable. Things start to not work or fall apart in ways that are actually asking us to get it together, to stand in our truth, to find our authentic path, and to find ways to bring about the changes that help to bring more equality, more social justice, more climate justice, responsibility for the world, responsibility for our part in leaving the world even in existence, let alone a better place, right? So when this pressure is there, things that we used to count on start to break down, and we can't count on them. So what that pressure is doing is it's asking us to look within, to ask ourselves, how can I make a difference? What can I contribute? I want to say too that this pressure brings an interesting shift in our culture, in our society, in the collective. And what it does is it's pushing us to evolve. So many people are saying, wow, racism is really a problem, and I want to understand better how I contribute to that and what I can do to right some of those wrongs. And there's a lot of that happening. A lot of people really wanting to do their part to make the world a better place. A lot of people stepping up to become either activists or just finding their way, their path of being able to have a way of making a difference and making the world a better place. And with this pressure to evolve, we also get the backlash. So we get the shifts and the opportunities for growth that show up within ourselves, but we also see the energy of resistance to change that shows up in the collective, in the different ways. And so it can go both ways, right? It's not a strictly like liberals are this way and conservatives are this way, because sometimes you see the liberals behaving in a more, like, actually, I don't want things to change. I kind of like the way it is, or I want my healthcare system and science, and I want my vaccine. And then maybe the more of the conservatives are starting to say, well, I want my freedom. I don't put me in a box. Don't make me wear a mask, those kinds of things. So it's not always cut and dry how it shows up, but you can see that these energies are there, the energy of change and solutions and problem solving, and the energy of resistance to change, and what that can look like, and how we sometimes use the narrative of freedom to avoid change. And if real change is actually, addressing the underlying causes of a pandemic, asking us to come together and have concern for our fellow human beings and not want to infect others or put those at risk, those who are already compromised at greater risk. So there are a lot of complicated ideas here. And this is showing up in the dynamic of this square. So the planet Saturn, which again is about conservative elements and restriction and contraction, is in this freedom-loving sign of Aquarius. And so the part of us that wants to feel safe is in a sign that wants to rebel. And that is putting pressure, creating pressure with the square to Uranus. Uranus is the planet of freedom, of progressive values, of equality, of change, of future thinking and thinking outside the box. And we have the planet Uranus in the sign of Taurus, which is not wanting to budge. Taurus likes things to be safe and stable and not to be challenged, and Taurus likes to be inside the box. and Uranus is the planet of thinking outside the box. So you put the planet of thinking outside the box into a sign that says, we like the box just fine, thank you very much. And then you put that in a square, which is creating pressure with the planet of hard work, effort, and structure and systems in the sign of change and thinking about the future and thinking about equality and humanitarian values. So there's a lot of this complicated pressure to both evolve. Well, there's pressure to evolve. There is pressure to shift our consciousness. There is pressure to grow as human beings, to expand our awareness. And I think that as we move along this evolutionary path, when we respond to the pressures to evolve, what it looks like is we change. We as human beings change. We adapt new ideas. We adapt to new realities. We open our minds. We step into our power in terms of wanting to reclaim freedom and justice and a secure and sane future. And then we have also this backlash or the resistance energy that's like putting on the brakes. I don't want to change. I do not want to evolve. And when these two elements come together, what you see is what's happening in society. And that is that we have this duality going on of different perspectives that are really on opposite sides of the fence, and it's getting harder and harder for those two perspectives to hear each other. And I think that is coming from the pressure to evolve, which can create this backlash of resistance to evolution. And so even as you have people stepping into an awareness of racism and social justice issues and all the ways that our institutions and systems continue and support this institutionalized racism. For example, I mean, there are many different issues we could look at, but to look at that one, and then we see how white supremacy is also taking root and also getting stronger in many ways, because that is the energy of resistance of, I don't want to go into this future. And it comes from a place of fear, right? The resistance is from not wanting to evolve. The resistance is not from, it's not about right and wrong. It's about there is a train going forward into the evolutionary process, and you can either get on the train or you can try to stop the train, but you're not. Ultimately, it is the train moving forward and ignoring the resistance, continuing to move forward anyway. And this is a little bit abstract when we talk about it in terms of society, but when we bring it back to our own personal process, and I invite you to think about, what are the challenges personally that have come up for you in the last year, 2 years, 5 years? What have you had to look at? In what ways have you made changes in your life, not just your life, but in your ways of thinking, in perhaps coming to terms with some old patterns, some ingrained ways of being that no longer serve you, and some ways that those are being invited to change and shift. And it's hard. It pushes us out of our comfort zone. And who has been in their comfort zone lately? Very few of us, I think, have actually felt comfortable most of the time. It is entirely possible to feel comfortable some of the time, and that's where the self-care comes in. But I want you to think about the past year and what you have learned and how you have changed, because those are the ways that you are invited in your life and on your evolutionary journey to align with this bigger collective change. And to notice also the places where you have resistance, or where that resistance shows up in your life. Have you had to say no to a job or a relationship or some factor in your life that is not part of your evolutionary journey, and for you to say, you know what, it's time for me to move on. So you might be being asked to do things like that. You might be being asked to look at your own personal process and thoughts and beliefs and the ways that you hold yourself back, because ultimately we all have the autonomy to look at ourselves and ask, okay, maybe I can't change the world around me, but I can change myself, and I can change the way I respond. And we are being asked to shift our response from a place of fear to more of a place of empowerment, of true creative movement, a place where we are standing in our power, a place we are coming from our own truth, our own sense of meaning and purpose. And so as you align more and more with your own sense of meaning and purpose, you are choosing to keep that train of evolution moving forward. And it's really that simple. It's really as simple as you doing your part to take care of yourself, to shift your own consciousness and move forward in the ways that your own healing path is inviting you to do. And as you do that, you're being part of the solution. So the square between Saturn and Uranus has been happening throughout 2021. It was exact in, let me just look at my notes here. It was exact in February, June, and then again on December 23rd. And so those are the 3 exact passes, but you can see, throughout this year, we've had this active square going on, pressuring us to evolve, saying, here's what the future could look like. Do you want to get on board with this? Are you willing to ignore the distractions, the fears that are jumping up and down on the sidelines saying, you can't do this, it's going to be horrible, don't trust yourself? And are you going to ignore that and keep going forward anyway? So that's what the square is inviting us to do. It's a lot of complicated energies showing up in complicated ways. And then that square is going to fade out after December, but it will reform or come very close to exact again in 2022 in October and early November. It's going to come within a degree again. So that's the energies and the themes of that pressure are going to show up again next year. And Interestingly enough, that square comes very close to exact. Again, it's within a couple of degrees during our 2022 midterm elections in the US. And so throughout October and then into early November, actually on election day, there is a lunar eclipse, and it activates that square between Saturn and Uranus in Taurus. It's going to be some interesting energies because there is tremendous pressure. And then, of course, the United States has its own chart, and that's something that we can look at as well. Is the evolutionary path of the United States of America. We also have, of course, the evolutionary path, and there's a chart for our country, but there's also an evolutionary path that we're all on. We're all under one sky, and that sky is continuing to move in its cycles that go like clockwork. It goes like a very, very complex clock. But it's predictable in what energies are going to show up at what times, and all of this is inviting us to keep moving forward, to discover more about ourselves, to heal our past, and open to our future. And so that is that's my summary of sort of how that square is going to look, how it has looked for us. And again, it will be interesting heading into the midterm elections. I think unpredictable results could occur. There's going to be pressure. There's going to be challenges. It's a T-square, so it is a T-square is like a double square. It's two planets in square to a third planet that are opposing each other. So this is our choice to shape the future through authentic action. And the more, again, that you can connect with your own truth, your own path of meaning and purpose, your authentic contribution. Some of us have a way of being authentic that's going to be public, and has to do with public service and running for office and activism and really getting involved in our communities. Others of us have a very private way of authentically making a difference, and do not underestimate the power of your own presence, even if you're an introvert, in the way that you connect with other people. Maybe you're at the grocery store, maybe you're walking your dog, maybe you're having a Zoom meeting, and how you show up and the way that you allow your light to shine, even if it feels small, but through kindness, through genuineness, through sharing your perspective, through being honest, through bringing your perspective, your story, your needs to the table. So it doesn't have to be some big public expression of change making. It can be more personal, more intimate. It can show up in your one-on-one relationships that are, that happen behind closed doors and nobody else even knows about it. But when you do that work of showing up more fully as yourself, more in your vulnerability, more in your openness and your willingness to learn and grow, that is part of the work of this evolutionary change, and it contributes to the healing of the collective more than you know. So that is the pressure of the Saturn Uranus square. The square, again, was exact in 2021. We still have one more exact pass. It's this pressure again to be who we are. And then heading into 2022, it won't be exact, but it will become very close and be very important during the eclipse in early November. So thank you so much for listening today. I really encourage you to check out more about what I'm doing at astrologyheals.com. If you are interested in exploring your own chart in looking through a reading. I do readings of charts, but they are more based on what from your chart is going to help you get insight into your own challenges and understanding your path and your purpose, where you're coming from, how to choose, make decisions as you go forward, and align with your own place of meaning and purpose and what that looks like. So rather than just telling you what your chart says, which I do that, but I also do a lot of listening and connecting of what's going on in your life and how your chart can give you insight into how to move forward through things that are challenging or confusing. Awesome. So check me out at astrologyheals.com. Thank you so much for watching. Upcoming, we have next week on December 23rd, we're going to be talking about Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces and the energy of this universal transcendent sign with these two planets that have to do with beliefs and spirituality and what we have faith in and how we can find optimism, what that means when those are in the great ocean of Pisces and forming a conjunction as those two outer planets come together. So we'll be exploring that next week. And then on December 30th, your evolutionary medicine and looking at your own lunar nodes and how you can be an agent of change and what your path of making a difference is. And then on January 6th, we'll talk about where we go from here and what that looks like. All right. Thanks again for watching. And we'll see you next week and enjoy.